I'm going to be asking for a lot of grace in this video, for a lot of hear me out, please. Let me be very clear. I love the Legendborn series. If you've been with me for a while, then you'll know that I started the series last year and absolutely fell in love with it. So imagine me anxiously waiting for this book to drop, following every announcement, update, and finally getting my audiobook from the library. Mind you, this is a 25-hour-long audiobook, so you know that I cracked that thing open immediately on launch day, and well, listen, this is a book that the community has been waiting for the past 3 years. With the release of Oathbound, it promised action, adventure, romance, and another stellar addition to the Legendborn series. And now, after reading the book, I don't really think it delivered. But without further ado, hello, welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say, and today I'm going to be giving an honest review of Oathbound. Now, right off the bat, I know that by opening my video this way, it will elicit certain reactions from readers. And you are allowed to feel any kind of way about what I'm about to say in this video, but all that I ask is that you watch the video all the way through before making any judgments. Just try to hear me out, and of course, feel free to leave any of your thoughts and criticisms of this video in the comments below. Disagree, agree, whatever, but all that I ask is that we be polite and respectful. Thank you. And of course, this video is going to have spoilers on books 1, 2, and 3 in the Legendborn series, so if you have not read any of those books, you might want to click off the video now. As for the rest of you, let's get started on this review. So now I'm going to start with a brief summary of Legendborn, Bloodmarked, and Oathbound. A lot has happened across the series so far, so I think it's best to have a little bit of a refresher. Legendborn is the series of Bree Matthews, a 16-year-old girl that's attending an early college program at the University of North Carolina. She is grappling with the recent death of her mother, but when she stumbles upon a secret society, she thinks that the two may be linked. This secret society is known as the Order. They are made up of the descendants of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Book 1 follows Bree as she enters the Order and discovers the truth about her family line, specifically that she is the true descendant and scion of King Arthur. Then in Book 2, Bloodmarked, we pick up right where we left off at the end of Book 1. Bree is trying to get accustomed to her new role as king. One of Bree's love interests, Nick Davis, was abducted at the end of Book 1, so she's also on a quest to try to find him. Bree finds out that the Regents, aka the governing body of the Order, is not too happy with a black girl being their scion. They try to conduct experiments on her, so she spends most of the book running from the Order and trying to find Nick, all while trying to master her new abilities, that being ether and rootcraft. This book ends with her making a deal with a demonic figure known as the Shadow King so that he will teach her how to control her powers. So now, in Oathbound, she is under the tutelage of the Shadow King. He takes on the human form of Erebus Varelian, one of the Merlins that serves the Regents. That way he can kind of moonlight in both spaces of this magical world. When she goes with him, she also loses part of her memories, where she knows the things that she's experienced, but she can't remember the names and faces of the people that she loves. While she's in training, there are 3 other journeys that we have to follow. Team 1 consists of Will, Nick, and Larkin. They are on an Order-sanctioned quest to hunt down the leader of the Morgaines, another antagonist in this series, one that we really don't pay too much attention to, but I'll get into that part later. Team 2 consists of Mariah and Valak. They are on a side mission to try and find Bree, while simultaneously figuring out a way to wake up her friend Alice from a magical coma. Then we have Team 3, which is made up of Natasha and Selwyn. Natasha Kane is the long-lost but very much alive mother of Selwyn Kane. At the end of Bloodmarked, he succumbed to his demonia, so he's like a full-on demon at this point. And in exchange for the Shadow King showing Bree how to use her powers, she made him take Sel to his mother so she could cure his demonia. So that's all of what she is trying to do for the majority of her chapters. That's the shortest possible recap I could have given for all 3 books. Mind you, each one is easily like a 20-hour audiobook, but this is what you need to know before getting into Oathbound. Now I'm going to get into my issues with this book and why I feel it's a little lackluster compared to the other 2. First, we're going to be talking about the change in perspectives in Oathbound. So Legendborn and Bloodmarked are both told in first-person point of view from Bree's perspective. Oathbound changes this format, instead adding 3 other characters, that being Will, Mariah, and Natasha. I think choosing to have these additional 3 perspectives from these specific characters was interesting because they're not who I would consider to be the main cast of characters. Granted, they are very important to the story, but they're not as central. It's not like Nick or Selwyn where they're the main love interests. Did I selfishly want to hear from Nick and Selwyn? Of course, but otherwise I didn't really have a problem with who she chose, but how it was done. Problem number 1 is that the chapters are just not distributed that well. Oathbound starts with a prologue that spans multiple chapters, all told in Bree's perspective. Once the prologue is done, we don't hear from Bree for the entirety of part 1 in this book. Given that there are 4 parts in this book, that's a solid 25% that you don't hear from your main character. Then, once all the characters are reunited at the auction in part 3, the rest of the book is told exclusively from Bree's perspective. We don't hear anything else from Will, Mariah, and Natasha gets like 1 or 2 chapters afterward. And of course, throughout parts 1 and 2, the distribution between Will, Natasha, and Mariah is also not ideal. Now, would I necessarily say that it has to be 1-for-1 chapter for each character? No, but it has to be distributed in a way that makes sense. And unfortunately, the way that these chapters were distributed made me forget where we were at in other plot lines. Also, I lied. I did actually have a problem with some of the characters that were chosen for these perspectives, but let me explain. So starting with Mariah, her character arc felt so weird to me. Granted, this is a character that we've never heard her internal thoughts before, but all of a sudden she brings up being envious of Bree. Like, she is jealous that Bree is so powerful, and she constantly refers to her as being the plan and the solution. Essentially, she just acknowledges how critical Bree's role is to the Rootcrafter community and the Legendborn. But this felt just so out of nowhere to me. When Mariah's character was introduced, to me she never communicated feeling inadequate in compared to Bree. I mean, she was the one that taught Bree most of what she knows now about Rootcraft. She was crucial in book 2 by helping foster a relationship between Bree and Valak. Had that relationship not occurred, Bree would have never known about her blood mark. So from when she was introduced to book 1 to her becoming more important in book 2, having her be insecure kind of feels out of character. She always came across as someone that was incredibly confident, or at the very least secure in who she was as a person. So to have all of her actions be motivated with, I'm gonna prove that I am as good as Bree, feels like so out of character for her. Then we move on to Will. I don't really have a problem with him as a character. He's a little stagnant. He doesn't have like a crazy character arc. And because of that, I don't understand why he was chosen to narrate instead of Nick. Nick is the major love interest in this book. In Bloodmarked, we heard all about Selwyn. In Legendborn, it was kind of split evenly between the two. So if this was supposed to be Nick's book, I think it would make more sense for him to narrate. The only reason I can see why he wasn't chosen is because a lot of his plans are supposed to be secret from Bree. For example, his whole plan with the Morganes and going on this quest, Will had absolutely no idea what Nick was planning. So by him not knowing, then we as the reader are surprised, and I get that. But as the reader, I would have really liked to hear Nick's thought process and see how he's coming up with these plans, because none of it made sense until I got to the end of the book. Without the context of why he's making these plans, all of Will's chapters just look like they are frolicking around the world, trying to find these Morgaines with absolutely zero leads. The most interesting thing about the Will chapters is his romance with Larkin, but it was fast. Lark starts calling him sweetheart before they've even had the chance to hold hands. Mind you, Will just got out of a long-term and somewhat serious relationship, so me as a slow burn girly, I was like, take me out to dinner first before you start calling me names. This is too fast, Larkin. But other than that, Will, again, just doesn't have a lot going for him in terms of a character arc. And the best part is that he disappears from the story the minute that they show up at the auction. So you hit part 3 and never see this character again until like the last chapter. The only important thing that happens in these chapters that Will discovers on his own without Nick is that the Order is collecting the blood of Morgaines. Now, this clue is meant to allude to the plot twist at the end of the book, where everyone finds out that the Order and the Regents are experimenting to try and create a different version of Bree. It's hard to explain, and honestly, I don't understand how their blood actually played into that. I don't know if it was ever really explained fully, but that could just be on me. That's a very real possibility. Then the third perspective is Natasha Kane, and she gets the least amount of chapters in this whole book, and it is criminal. First of all, nothing actually happens in her chapters. The most interesting part is when Sel is there and he is like possessed by a demon of sass. Like, he is just giving her so much shit, and it is absolutely funny to watch. And I'm upset because her narration and her personality is just so striking compared to the other characters. Like, her mannerisms and the way that she talks is just so funny and so entertaining, and I hate that we didn't get to hear more from her. But granted, a lot of her chapters are boring. Each one is just some kind of variation of, man, Sel's being a real jerk lately. Maybe that's because he's a demon now. God, I haven't the slightest idea how to fix him. I wish my good friend, and definitely not the secret love of my life, aka Faye, aka Bree's mom, was here to help me. But anyway, Sel doesn't really say too much in these chapters. All he does is fuck with her and taunt her over and over. Mind you, Natasha's chapters are supposed to be uber important to the end of the book. They're supposed to lay out major hints and clues about the earth-shattering plot twist at the end. This twist that is supposed to set up the entire plot and conflict of book 4, mind you, which, in case you didn't know, is also the last book in the series. So I feel as though maybe, perhaps, we should have had more chapters from her perspective and made them a little bit more obvious, with a little bit more pizzazz. But my issues with the choice in character perspectives really just leads into my bigger issue with the characters themselves. Let's start off with our king, Bree. A lot of reviews on Goodreads mentioned that Bree's character was essentially reset for this book, and I wholeheartedly agree. In this book, Bree is someone who is incredibly impulsive, someone who acts with reckless abandon, even putting the people around her at risk, which the Bree of books 1 and 2 was always very concerned with the well-being of the people that she knew and loved. She was more likely to be reckless with herself without realizing how it was impacting the people around her. And when she did, she stopped. She changed her behavior. She just became inexplicably detached, and I find it hard to believe that the only reason she acted that way was because she didn't have the names and faces of the people that she loved. It feels like such a huge character shift, even though she still had the feelings associated and the actual memories of the events that happened. Now, of course, main characters will always make decisions that make you mad as the reader, so that's pretty run-of-the-mill, especially with YA. So I don't necessarily have a huge problem with this. My biggest issue with what Bree does in this book is that she lets her best friend, Alice, die, essentially. At the end of the book, Bree sacrifices Alice so that she can get a chunk of her soul back. Now, I have issues with this for a number of reasons. Number one, we never really understood why this was such a big deal, other than like, yeah, ideally you probably want all your soul. Like, what would have realistically happened if she never got that chunk back? Valak makes some offhand remark of like, oh, people that lose a chunk of their soul are always on the wrong path and they never follow their supposed destiny. That doesn't feel scary enough to me. Like, that is not as big of a threat as losing my best friend forever after me personally, caused her to be in a coma and am now sentencing her to death so I can get this soul chunk back. Like, I don't understand why it's such a big deal. I would have liked to have some clear and outlined stakes in order for me to understand why she would make this decision. Because when Bree made that deal with the Shadow King, maybe she didn't know Alice's face or name, but again, she still had all the emotions tied to her. She had the memories. She knew that that was her best friend. She just didn't know her name. There's absolutely nothing that would have suggested that this wouldn't have been the hardest decision of her life to make. Choosing your soul or your best friend, but she didn't even think about it.
It's more important, weed or us?
Weed.
Man, he didn't even think about it.
Also, her whole arc in this book is that she wanted to get stronger, like she hated not being able to use her abilities. And I feel like no one ever really acknowledged how much stronger she got. Everyone was talking about her as if she had always been this super OP character. And yes, she was, because she had that access, but she wasn't able to really use it properly. So I feel like no one really acknowledged how much she grew in this short time span. At the beginning of Bloodmarked, she was literally burning herself on ether. And now she is casting with Merlin level precision, and everyone was like, yes, you have always been that way. That's a lie. I feel like it almost took away from her actual hard work and progress by having people just acknowledge that she's always been powerful, which yes, she is, but she still got more powerful. There's nothing wrong with giving her a little credit where credit is due. But that's enough about Bree. Now we're gonna move on to Nick Davis. I'm gonna tell you, he brought the charm this book. He really brought his A game in this book, and he gave me a run for my money. I've been Team Selwyn since the first page of that book. Most of my grievances with Nick in this book is all to do with his relationship with Bree. Every romantic interaction he has with Bree is almost entirely physical, and I felt like their relationship wasn't being developed on an emotional level. Their relationship relied heavily on Bree's body remembering Nick and remembering the feelings that she had for him, and therefore sparking certain reactions when he was nearby. But otherwise, nothing about their relationship suggests that it's anything more than physical. This is why personally I've always been Team Cell, because yes, they do have romantic attraction to each other, but they're also like on pretty equal footing. Like they bicker, they argue, he throws some shade at her and she throws it right back, and they're constantly butting heads, but that also means that they challenge each other and therefore deepen their emotional connection. But every scene with Bree and Nick in this book made me feel so like, oh my god, I should not be here. Let me give you guys some privacy. I should close the book now. Which I know a lot of people said, yes, they're getting older, their relationships are therefore maturing as well, but it still felt weird to me because even though that's the Bree you know, she doesn't know who you are. It almost felt borderline, like a power imbalance, as if he was taking advantage of her body's reactions to him, and he didn't really take into account how weird it would be for her and how confusing it would be to have all these feelings for someone that you don't know. It was hard to read because Nick as a character is of course not like that. He's not a bad person, and I don't think he would ever be capable of doing something like that, but that's how it felt to me, and it did feel a little icky, and you know, whatever, sue me. On a lighter note, the motif of their relationship, call and response, oh my god, I need us to never say those words ever again. This phrase is repeated to death. I hated it in book 1, I hated it in book 2, and I hated it in book 3. I think we can put it to rest. If I never hear those words again, it'll be too soon. I don't know why I hate it this much, but it's just, oh god, it's my biggest pet peeve with this book. And mind you, I love it. I still love Legendborn. I still love Bloodmarked. That is the one thing that I wish I could change about those books. One, I hate it because it's repetitive. And two, it implies that their connection with each other is inevitable. Like it's the residual effects of the bond between Lancelot and Arthur and it's bleeding into their scions. Obscure reference, but kind of like how the holders of the cat and ladybug miraculous will always fall in love with each other. Either way, it makes it feel as though it's not a conscious choice on either of their parts and just something that was always supposed to happen. Which, that is a personal ick for me. I don't think, it's not a destiny thing. It's a choice to fall in love with someone. I don't know. Then we have some new characters in this book, that being Zoe and Elijah. Honestly, my biggest fear with their introduction was that Elijah was going to be a third love interest for Bree. My heart can barely handle being torn in half between Nick and Sel. I could not have done it a third time. So I'm glad that he wasn't. But if that changes in book 4, I swear to God, I'm gonna lose it. Zoe definitely gets more screen time out of the two, but her friendship with Bree felt a little sudden. When she's first introduced, she is like about to eat Bree. So it took me a while to realize that, oh, she is actually an ally, like she's supposed to be on the good guy side. I had my guard up for a really long time reading through this book, and it was only until like halfway through part 3 that I was like, oh, she's supposed to be a good person actually. Okay, maybe I don't have to be freaked out all the time. But mostly, I just feel like there's already a lot of characters. It was already hard for me to memorize all the scions and their squires and the people, like the regents and all the knights of the round table. It was a lot. So I'm trying to keep track of it as best as I can. And my only hope is that Zoe and Elijah don't just fade out of existence in book 4. Then we have the Morgaines, and honestly, their character has always been a sore spot for me. The Morgaines are magical creatures similar to the Merlins, but they have kind of branched off and created their own separate entity from that of the Order. Listen, my issue is that book 1 sets them up as if they're going to be this huge antagonist. By the end of book 1, it's laid out. Bree is up against Lord Davis and the Regents, the Order, the bad people, and also the Morgaines, because the Morgaines were working with the demons who were eating people, which was bad. So we had 2 antagonists, and when I went into Bloodmarked, I was like, okay, we're going to be learning more about the Morgaines, because we only learned a little bit in passing. We had never met a Morgaine, we had never seen what they could really do, and mind you, they're supposed to be our antagonist, so sue me if I expected to see them in book 2. We don't get to actually see a Morgaine until like the last few chapters of Bloodmarked. And it is a surprise appearance where everything that they did, teaming up with the Scions and fighting against the Regents, happens in the background. So we as the reader are just magically, very suddenly introduced to a major antagonist, and then they leave in the same chapter, never to be seen again. So I guess my biggest grievance is just that we learn most about the Morgaines in book 1, and then they just kind of disappear for books 2 and 3. I just feel like I need a little bit more lore from them. We heard how they were casted out from the Order, but otherwise, there's more that we could know about them. To me, the Morgaines just kind of feel like a world-building plug. So if there's any gaps in continuity or things that don't make sense, we just kind of blame it on the Morgaines. Which, oh my God, speaking of world building, this is my favorite. And by favorite, I mean bane of my existence. Let's start with the crown. The Shadow King's stupid little crown. At some point in this book, everyone is unknowingly chasing after the Shadow King's crown, and for different reasons. The crown was the source of the Shadow King's power, but it was stolen by King Arthur after he was defeated. Then, Morgaine, the original one, took the crown and then passed it on to her descendants to hide it and stow it away for safekeeping. But then, it was stolen from them by warlocks. So that's why now everyone is simultaneously trying to track down this crown. The first problem is why Bree and Zoe are after the crown. The whole reason that they want it is because at some point in the book, Bree is on a mission with Zoe and Elijah. She's in this club, and in the bathroom of the club, she sees this girl. This girl is in bad shape. She's accompanied by this shady-looking dude who hits her, and Bree rushes in to help, as one does. She finds out that this girl is a root crafter, and before she can step in, the girl is like, "No, I'm fine, leave me alone," and she leaves with the dude. Bree tries to chase after her, but she loses sight of the warlock. She then comes to the conclusion that the Shadow King kidnapped this root crafter girl so that he could feed off of her power. So she teams up with Zoe so that they can steal the Shadow King's crown and give it to him. Just in case you forgot, the source of all his power, give it back to him so that he won't feed off of root crafters. There is no long-term thinking about the possible ramifications of giving this ultra-powerful demon the one thing he needs to assume power. Because then I would also ask, if you give him the crown, yes, he would stop feeding off of root crafters, but then what other horrors could a demon inflict against them instead? To me, it just doesn't communicate that they would then be safe. Other things could just then happen to them because at the end of the day, he's still a demon. The second problem is Nick's reason for wanting to go after the crown. This one is kind of a train wreck. The lore behind the Shadow King's crown is that it grants him 2 powers. The first is that he can walk in the human world without needing to feed off of ether. The second is that this ability can be passed on to other demons in his court. The original Morgaine then figured out a way to transfer her soul and power into the body of anyone that had a chunk of the Shadow King's crown embedded in their own body. Now, how this power transfers? No clue. It works for the Shadow King onto his court. How did you just piggyback onto that, you know? But anyway, now all Morgaines have a chunk of the Shadow King's crown in their bodies. That is what gives them power. So here's the part where I don't understand where this thinking came from. Nick's whole plan, the reason he escaped the Order, the reason he went on this quest, found the Morgaines, and helped them find the crown, is because he wanted, in exchange, for them to put a chunk of the crown in his body so that in the event that Arthur possessed Bree again, he was the one that made her go all evil, put her friend into a coma, in case that happened, he could then touch Bree, absorb the spirit of Arthur, and hold it in his body instead. Now, quickly, explain how that works. How does not needing to feed on ether and being able to transfer that power onto other people then turn into, I can absorb the souls of dead knights and trap it in my body? How? Why? How did we get here? None of this makes any kind of logical sense in my brain. I reread that explanation, no kidding, 4 times because I was like, surely I'm just stupid and I'm missing something. But no. That is the explanation. That's what we get. This whole crown business is just really where we went wrong. But then we move on to the Order because, in case you forgot, they're still here too, and they are also the antagonist. My whole issue with them is just in general for the overall story of Legendborn, and that is for some reason in book 2, science was introduced. They experimented on Bree, and that was one thing. But now they are using her blood to try and figure out a way to essentially clone her, or rather, clone her powers into a scion that they find more agreeable. In this world, you have people that are able to be magically possessed by the spirits of the Knights of the Round Table. They have these super cool magical abilities. Will is the scion of Gawain, so he gets ultra buffed out at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. He can heal almost anyone with ether, and you're telling me that also alongside him is test tubes and science? I don't read a ton of fantasy, but this ruins the illusion of fantasy for me. This is really personal. I do not like the inclusion of science in this book, and I pray that it goes away in book 4. Overall, I think we're just losing the antagonist of the Order a little bit. Like in this book, they are trying to create a new scion of Arthur, but we never see them actively doing it. So I'm just losing the looming threat that they're supposed to be, just a little bit. But focusing on our main antagonist in this book, which is the Shadow King. First issue, he has too many names. He's the Shadow King, Erebus Varelian. He has a third one that I forgot to write down. Second of all, he is the most non-threatening, supposedly ultra evil, worst villain of all time that I've ever read. At one point, he has Bree, Nick, Mariah, and Zoe trapped in a cell, and he just leaves them there with the crown in the cell right next to them. Like they escape within the day and find the crown on accident. Like he just left that thing laying around as if it's not the source of his power. This is kind of funny, and it's not like a huge issue, but Bree gives him shit all the time and he just kind of takes it, and I find it funny. You know what? That's a pro. I will qualify that as a plus for this book. But their final showdown, the one between Bree and the Shadow King, is incredibly anticlimactic. Like I couldn't even really explain to you how she managed to overpower him. The only thing she says is, "I'm calling you," which I don't know what that means. Like she just kind of holds him with her root things and he like folds like a lawn chair. Like, is she sucking his power away? Did she trap him in the ancestral stream? Like, I need a little bit more to go off of than "I'm calling you." Like, this showdown is supposed to be super important because Bree is supposed to be bargaining to get her soul back. But really, this entire interaction just boils down to Dora. She hits him with the swipe or no swiping, and he goes, "Oh man," and gives her her soul back. Just at the expense of Alice waking up from her coma. But I already said my piece on that. Then the last issue I have is the Selwyn reveal. Oh my god, bro. I cannot tell you the gasp that I gusped when I heard, oh my god, when I was reading that chapter, my mouth was hanging open, for real. I am not opposed to this happening. In fact, I love it. Tracy Deonn is definitely a master of endings, and this book was no exception. My issue is that this was not alluded to at all. Natasha herself reiterates in this book that Selwyn's father, handsome as he is human. So I'm just like, did Erebus pretend to be a human person? And if so, why? Like, why create a baby? Obviously, he knows that Selwyn is his kid. Like, what was the purpose of that? Did he have a nefarious, like, I need an heir? Like, what really was the thought process here? Was he just whining and dining Natasha Kane for funsies? Like, did he even really know? I also think that Selwyn's demonia forcing him to cause all this chaos is a little hard to wrap my mind around. I think it would have worked better if we saw another Merlin descend into demonia so we could better understand its effects and how someone might act differently after the descent. But otherwise, nothing in Natasha's chapters made me think that this is where the book was going. So yeah, it's a plot twist, but part of it is because it's literally coming from nowhere. I like it. I like where we're going for book 4, but I would have enjoyed a few more clues. And if there were that I just missed, point them out. I am occasionally dumb. But with this reveal, with this plot twist of Selwyn Kane being the new Shadow King, we have to discuss, where do we think the rest of the series is going to go now that we have this reveal? The biggest takeaways from this book and what you need to know before going into book 4 is A, Selwyn is now the Shadow King. Bree can control ether and knows how to use her own abilities, and she has her memories back. C, Alice is in a forever coma. And D, Nick still has a chunk of the Shadow King's crown in his chest, which is useless because Bree burnt up her ancestral stream and Arthur can no longer possess her. Honestly, I really couldn't say what I think book 4 is going to be about. I think maybe the goal will be to cure Sel of his demonia, maybe dissolve the order while they're at it. But I definitely think that we're leaning into the direction of getting rid of the Legendborn Cycle. But I can tell you from experience that with every single sequel, I have grossly miscalculated what it was going to be about. I don't know what it is. I'm really bad at anticipating what's coming next. Like for Bloodmarked, I really thought we were gonna get like a cute cross-country adventure with Sel and Bree and their friends, and they were gonna be fighting, and she was gonna get stronger with experience, and he was gonna teach her how to use a sword by putting his little hands over hers. None of that happened. So I'm not a good person to base your guesses off of. Now I go into my final thoughts about this book. My biggest concern is that this book was not supposed to exist. Tracy Deonn has said on the record multiple times that this was not a book that she anticipated writing. Legendborn was supposed to be a trilogy, but this was the book that she said she didn't know she had to write, but was glad that she did. Something along those lines. I forget what her exact quote is. But I'm afraid that maybe there was a reason why this book wasn't supposed to exist. I think the world building was heavily stretched to its limits. A lot of the character arcs were reset only to be realized for a second time. And overall, things just don't really make sense. I feel like out of all 3 books we've had so far, Legendborn by far has the tightest plot out of all of them. As the books have gotten longer, I feel like we've branched out and we're at a point where we're kind of losing our grip on the world building. Everything's a little up in the air. There's a lot of different things that we're juggling, and I would love to see book 4 go back to being more concise and condensed. Now, I know it's hard to judge a series, especially when it's unfinished, so I will leave my overall judgments on Legendborn as a whole until book 4 comes out. And I do have very high hopes for book 4, despite my review and despite everything I've said in this video so far. Unfortunately, to me, this book really just feels like filler. Now, for my rating, I think I'm gonna give this book a 3 out of 5. I am very, very conflicted. Getting to see Bree realize her full potential and seeing her training arc was very entertaining, and I loved every bit of it. I also loved that we got to see more of Valak. He was one of my favorite side characters from book 2, and I love that he didn't disappear. Getting to hear more of his backstory, his lore, was everything I needed in this book. And I can't deny, the romance between Will and Lark did feed me for a bit since Bree was separated from Nick and Sel. And I know that Sel is a literal demon now, but I cannot tell you the genuine giddiness that I felt when he was on screen. When he was confronting Nick and Bree and literally threatening them, oh my god, I was kicking my feet. It was so good. The best parts of his character were really amplified with his demonia, I feel. Like he is just more like snappy, witty, very sarcastic and sassy, and I love all those things about his character. So I'm genuinely excited to see how like ruthless he will be in book 4. I'm so devastated that I didn't like this book as much as I liked the others. Now, of course, there's 4 books in the series. One of them is bound to be your least favorite. I don't think that means that the book is not good. I just don't think it stands up to the others. And granted, this could also just be a reflection on me as a reader. I don't read a ton of fantasy, and Legendborn made me think that I liked fantasy. I am just also someone that gets confused easily, so I take a lot of notes. And because I take a lot of notes, specifically with fantasy books, I think I'm more likely to ask questions and see when things kind of don't make sense. I think a lot of the problems of this book could have been solved if it was just a little bit shorter, which I know people have very strong opinions when I say that books should be a little bit shorter, but this is a really good example. There are some things that I feel just don't need to be mentioned. I think it's a stylistic choice, a lot of the extra details that we get, but I think it also takes away from some of the world building, which is what I appreciate about fantasy. Overall, I want to reiterate, that I still love Legendborn. I will absolutely read book 4, and just because I didn't like this book as much as I like the rest, doesn't mean that I don't like the series. I still think that Tracy Deonn is an amazing writer. She has made leaps and bounds in the writing world. She will absolutely go down in history for this series. You just can't win them all. You know, if she won with every single book, she'd be too powerful. I think this book just didn't quite hit the right spots for me the same way that Legendborn did. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that. This is just my opinion, and I'm okay with however people will react to that. And I'm okay for people to rightfully call me out on anything I've said and critique me, because you know what? That's okay. So I invite discourse. I invite for people to tell me what they think, and I hope you will in the comments below. But with that, I think that's the end of the video. Today is actually my birthday, so I'm going to have my birthday dinner now. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Don't be too mean to me in the comments, guys, please. Thank you.